Welcome to today's edition of It's Not All Pina Coladas and Sunny Beaches. We are currently in Sandy Hook, New Jersey. You can see off in the distance New York City, about 14 miles away. We were hoping to leave a couple days ago. High winds, rough seas, and yesterday pretty much a day full of rain and wind kept us here. And there's a big windstorm coming in 4 days, and we're trying to get back to Annapolis. Now we're down to 3 days to do it, and we were going to leave today, but we still have some pretty high winds, 15 to 16 knots steady and gusting up to 20, and the seas offshore are about 3 feet with a 6-second period, which isn't too miserable, but the combination is just enough to keep us here. So now we're going to try to figure out how to get back to Annapolis, make a 4-day trip into a 3-day trip. 3 long days. This is where we are, and we need to come all the way down the Jersey coast, go up to Delaware Bay, and there's a canal here that takes us over to the Chesapeake Bay. We come down the Chesapeake Bay. Just below Baltimore is Annapolis, and that's what we're trying to get to. It's about 240 miles, so in 3 days, about 80 miles a day, roughly 13, 14-hour days. We can do it if all the conditions are right. Wind, sea state, and currents. That's what we have to look at. So we start with this app. It's called Windy, and the cool thing about it is it shows us the projected winds and sea state for any point that we choose. So we're going to just try this spot, which is about a third of the way down the coast. It's halfway between Sandy Hook, where we are, and Atlantic City. So that will give us some idea of what the conditions will be if we were to leave tomorrow. So here we can see these are the hours of the day across the top, then the wind direction, and then here we have the wind speed and the expected wind gusts. So tomorrow the winds look like they're going to be mostly out of the pretty much northerly direction. And in the afternoon they switch to southeast, roughly 6 knots, gusting to around 11. That's not a big deal. Unfortunately, it doesn't allow us to sail. Down here we have the sea state. So it tells us that tomorrow the seas are going to be about 2 feet with almost a 10-second period. That is pretty comfortable compared to today, which is almost 4 feet with a 7-second period. Bigger seas closer together is not a pleasant ride, especially in these kind of winds that we are currently experiencing. So for the first leg of our trip, we're going to try to get to Atlantic City, and it looks like the wind and the sea state are going to cooperate with us. And because we're going offshore, we can expect a little bit of an offshore current, maybe a half a knot or so, and that might slow us down at some point. So we're going to probably count on doing about 6 knots for that whole trip. So that's the first day. Then on the second day, we're going to try to go from Atlantic City around Cape May and almost all the way up the bay to the entrance of the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal. And so if we take a look at 2 spots here, one would be the offshore from Atlantic City down to Cape May. And on Thursday, we can see in the morning we're going to have some north and northeast winds ranging from 5 to about 12 knots and could be gusting to 16. Well, that's not bad because that will be downwind for us and might give us just a little bit of a boost. And the seas will be around 3 feet with 10 to 11 second period. Again, fairly benign, not too rough. So we know that for the first half of that trip, the seas should be pretty decent, the winds should be pretty decent to get us from Atlantic City down to Cape May. Then we make the turn, Cape May, up the Delaware Bay to where we will probably anchor. And so if I put the pin about halfway up that trip, we'll get an average of what we'll see during that leg. And so here we are Thursday afternoon. We can see that starting around 2 o'clock, the winds are going to shift out of the southwest. 5 o'clock, they'll be out of the southeast. Again, following winds, 8 to 12 with gusts up to 15. And the seas should be comfortable, about 1 foot with a 9 or 10 second period. So that should be a pretty comfortable ride. But the one thing that we're going to have to take a look at pretty carefully for that leg is the current, because the current in this bay can be pretty stiff. So we'll go over to another app that we have. This is our navigation app. And so here's the Delaware Bay, and if we zoom in just enough, we can see all of these little arrows that indicate current flow. And if you click on one of them, so for example, if we click on this one down at the bottom, it gives us a nice chart of what the current will be throughout the day and which direction. So by Thursday, here we are, Thursday at 1:45 a.m. The current starts to go down the bay, and it does that until about 8 o'clock when it's turning, and you'll watch this little arrow as the clock progresses. You'll see that it starts to carry the water up the bay until 10:35 at its maximum flow of 1.58 knots, and then the water goes up the bay until almost 2:30. Now that's just at the bottom near Cape May. What we also want to check is what is the current flow going to be farther up. So if we check this one right here, because by the time we get to this point in our trip, it will be late afternoon. So we want to see what the current's going to be doing late Thursday afternoon. And we can see that it's at maximum favorable or fair current at around 123. And it continues going north, the direction we want to go, right up until about 5 o'clock. Now we're not expecting to get to where we're going to anchor until probably close to 7 o'clock. So by 7 o'clock we might have as much as a knot and a half of current against us, but all the way up until 5 o'clock Thursday afternoon we should have favorable current. And then the last thing we want to do is check out the final leg of our trip, which will be on Friday. And on Friday we're going to go from right up here where the entrance of the canal is. That's where we're going to anchor Thursday night. And we're going to come through the canal, we'll go down the Chesapeake Bay. So let's pick a spot right on the Chesapeake Bay, right around here. And we'll scroll over to Friday. This is our Friday conditions on the Chesapeake Bay. And we'll get to the Chesapeake Bay sometime in the, probably around the 9 or 10 o'clock time frame after we go through the canal. And it looks like we're going to have northeast and east winds for most of the day. These winds are 6 to 10, gusting all the way up to about 19 later in the afternoon. Actually pretty good sailing winds. And then the seas are less than a foot with about a 2-second period. A bit choppy, but nothing that we can't manage. And if we have our sails up, that will help balance the boat and keep it a smooth ride. So wind and sea state looks like it will cooperate. And then again, we need to flip over to our navigation app. And now we need to see what the currents are going to do. So here we are at the beginning of the canal. You can see that there are current indicators that go through the canal. And then as we go farther down into the Chesapeake Bay, there's more current indicators. So what we want to do is make sure that going through the canal, it's not going to slow us down too much. And this is the current going through the canal. Now Friday morning, we might have to extrapolate a little bit because I don't think this goes out. No, it doesn't go out to Friday morning. So there's usually about a 45-minute difference from day to day. What that means is if the current starts running east, or west I should say, at 3:30 in the morning on Thursday, it will start running west about 4:15 on Friday. And then it will continue running west up until about 7:45. So if we can get up early enough and get through the canal by 7:45, we'll have a fair current, a favorable current on that part of the trip. The canal is about 15 miles long, which would normally be about 2.5 hours. So if we want to finish the canal trip by 7:45, we need to be up by 5. And then if we come out to Chesapeake Bay, and let's say we get down to around this point of the bay by sometime in the mid-morning, we want to see what the currents are going to do to us. Well, again, we'll have to extrapolate, so we'll see what it's going to do Thursday morning. And Thursday morning, it's going to run south from about 3 a.m. until about 11 a.m. on Thursday. That means on Friday, it will run south until around 11:45, maybe noon. And then it switches, but only for a brief period of time. And it only goes a quarter of a knot against us. And then again, at around 2:30, it starts to push us south again. So that's a favorable condition as well. And we do that all the way down the bay, and we'll see that by the time we get to maybe just 3 hours from home, the current starts going south at around 1, and again this is on Thursday, and stops going south around 6. So what that means is on Friday the current will be running south until around 6:45, which is perfect because we should be home by then. So what we've done is we've checked wind, current, and sea state for every portion of our trip. Now I'm visual, so I decided to put this into a visual format that I could see, and I put the numbers down for each of the 3 legs of the trip. Wednesday from Sandy Hook to Atlantic City, Thursday from Atlantic City to where we're going to anchor, Reedy Island, and then Friday, Reedy Island all the way to Annapolis. We've got columns for wind, current, and seas. The numbers are less important than the colors here. So what I've decided to do is anytime that one of the conditions, whether it's wind, current, or seas, is favorable, in other words, it's going to help us go faster, I put it in green. If it's going to significantly slow us down, I put it in red. As you can see, there is no red. And if it's marginal, in other words, it might slow us down just a little bit, then it's in yellow. And that's what we see Wednesday from around 2 o'clock until the end of the day. We're going to have wind that is going to be on the nose. That's what the negative means, -6 to 8 knots. And a little bit of an opposing current of about a half a knot. So for about the last 6 hours of our 13, we're going to slow down a little bit. So that's why we want to try to make as much progress early, because we know we're going to get slowed down a little bit by the end of the day. So that's what we do. We do this each time we go somewhere, and we have a number of tools that we use. This one is called Wind Finder, and so you can see that it's got this really convenient sliding scale. Wednesday, it looks like, we've got comfortable conditions, but you saw that the sea state wasn't going to be that great, and right now the winds are a little bit higher than advertised. Thursday, mostly comfortable, and then Friday, you can see, green means that it's usually good sailing weather, and the direction of these arrows is this way, and that's good for us. But here's what we're trying to avoid. You see on Saturday this red creeping into the picture. That's going to make life miserable, so we want to try to get home by then. So we have a number of these apps and things that we look at to help us figure out what makes the most sense for traveling. This is an app called Aquamap, and we purchased the extra features in it so that you can see that it gives you what the offshore sea currents are. Blue is minimal, and it also has a sliding scale so that you can see throughout the day. And it's got a 40-hour window. You can see what the currents are going to do. So another helpful tool, and all of that goes into just figuring out when's the best time to go, and what we should be concerned about, whether it's rough seas or heavy winds in the wrong direction, currents that can slow us down. We had a current going through New York City that pushed us an extra 3 knots. If we had to go against that current, the trip that took us 2 hours would have taken us 7. So all part of what we do each day when we are planning our moves, and sometimes it's a lot simpler. We're just making a short jump of 30 to 50 miles. But here we are trying to figure out how to get 240 miles in 3 days, 80 miles a day, long days. And if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that things are going to at least not work against us. And it looks like they're going to mostly work in our favor. So there you go. I hope this was informative and didn't bore you too much. I appreciate you taking the time to watch.